Hello, I'm Dr. Gregory Mortensen, Director of the Deploy the Arts Theater Program at Long Beach City College, as well as this offering you're about to see. As to the players who you're going to see perform are not only veterans, but non-veterans as well, as we have a 70 to 30% comparative. So enjoy them, see what they do. Hope it connects. Hello, I'm Dr. Gregory Mortensen, Director of the Deploy the Arts Program at Long Beach City College. What you're about to see is our second offering of Deploy the Arts, Arts Underlined. And the performers are not only veterans, but non-veterans as well, as our framing, if you will, is 70% veterans, 30% non, which helps the integration process. These pieces are all titled, you'll see them on the screen card, but they're under the heading of Other Country. And I think you'll understand as the performing progresses. So enjoy. And for further information, at the very end, there's a screen card that has my contact phone and website and email. So please enjoy. And if you like it, tell everybody else. And if you don't, thank you.
I had just turned 21 and went to hear Henry Phipps, the Sunday school superintendent, make a speech in Bindle's Opera House. The whole town turned out to hear his oratory. The honor of our flag must be upheld, he said, whether it be assailed by a barbarous tribe of Tagalogs or the greatest power in Europe. We all cheered and cheered the speech as he waved and waved the small flag as he spoke. So I enlisted in the army and went to war, despite the wishes of my father. And I followed the flag. I saw it raised in victory in our camp by a rice field near Manila. And we all saluted it and cheered it. But there were the swarm of flies and mosquitoes and the slithering, crawling, poisonous things. And there was the deadly water and the never-ending cruel heat and the sickening, putrid food and the smell of the trench just behind our tents where the soldiers went to empty themselves. And there were the whores who followed us, full of syphilis. And the beastly acts between ourselves or alone, with the bullying, the hatred, and the degradation among us, and the days of loathing and nights of fear, until the time, to the hour of the charge. Charge through the steaming swamp. Follow the flag, boys, follow the flag. Till I fell with a scream. Shot through the guts. Now, there's a small flag over my grave in the town cemetery. A flag! A flag.
I was proud to be a part of the Navy for about 5 minutes. All right. I was selfish and inconsiderate, and every day I got shit for it. I would get write-ups, and occasionally I'd have to go see the CPO, the divisional chief. But I didn't care. All I cared about was getting the fuck out of there. Who wants to be owned and treated like your property? Shipmate. Yes, chief. Your boots ain't shine, shipmate. Aye, chief. We had this one guy named Fish. He was a fuck up. I mean, they should have kicked him out long before I was a shitbag on their radar. Let's put things into perspective. We're talking about jet fuel that can send any battleship flying to the moon. When we're in operation, though, he'd be off chasing off butterflies. I couldn't trust this guy with my life. We used to be close. I used to talk to him. He'd always tell me put 100% into everything that you do, no matter it is what you're doing. I thought he was crazy. Me put 100% into the military, as if. Look where that got him. All of that, and we still ended up an airman getting out the Navy. The only difference, he put up with the shit. Early work hours, later than normal work hours, study groups for exams, but still failing. Not me, not that shit. But he still tried, as if he was actually part of the team. But how can you be part of the team when you're easily forgotten? Expendable. How can I be part of something that is supposedly greater than myself? Long story short, I wasn't part of the Navy. Proud to be part of the Navy. But I think I mixed the bigger picture of the greater good.
Floated on my back in the biggest pool I'd ever been in. The midday desert heat, the neat lines of palm fringed date trees, barely shading the white chase lounges. The diving platforms with gold plated handrails and exquisite handcrafted tiles almost let me believe that I was in the Caribbean at some gaudy rum soaked Club Med, an acid dream of a resort. Almost. What I couldn't avoid was the war's calling card, constant sound of nearby firing gun practice, a symphony of percussive machine gun paka 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 that only led up to reload. Between 2008 and 2010, I was stationed in Baghdad as the U.S. Army intelligence liaison to the U.S. Foreign Services, in one of Director Hussein's former palaces. The pool was part of the grounds and was used by some military, the international community, and diplomats. The dimensions were a staggering 45 yards long and 30 yards wide. I wasn't alone in my daily aquatic forays, as groups of soldiers off guard duty kept the rust off their swimming skills. In my pre-war life, I had been a professional lifeguard and swimming instructor. And once word got out that I possessed those skills, inquiries about swim lessons came up. It began with 2 lessons a week. Cooks, drivers, translators, diplomats, and civilians all came to me as their coach. It became a miniature United Nations. And after a couple months of lessons, the Baghdad Swim Club was born. A new group of students showed up, people who had never worn a swimming suit or anything like it. They were Muslim women who had also never worn a swimming suit or anything like it in public. They came poolside, clothed head to toe, and wanted to learn how to swim. Some held up Land's End catalogs and asked me what swimwear they should buy. Knowing beyond nothing about proper religious clothing, I sought out a Bengali-raised colleague of mine who saved me by suggesting that they should buy conservative 2-piece Speedo tank suits, all black. They got them and took to the water like a fat man takes to a donut. Amazing. By the time my rotation date came in 2010, the Baghdad Swim Club had taught over 300 people how not to drown. When I got back stateside, I was hosting a dinner with friends, and one of them remembered what her mother had said from being a Vietnam combat nurse. In war, people crave normalcy. Letters, baby pictures, food from home, a safe routine in the chaos. She said that's what I had done. A safe zone of water in the desert of war.
I was a medic in a support unit. So when I deployed to Afghanistan, I worked in the main aid station on post. A lot of what I remember from Afghanistan is surreal, almost as if I heard it from somebody else. But there are a few things that I remember vividly. I remember the sinking feeling I would get in my stomach whenever we'd hear the incoming alarm, because that meant that we'd go out looking for casualties. The throbbing pressure of the choppers when we go to pick up a patient, the feeling of blood on my hands, the acrid smell of guts being cauterized while a doc was taking shrapnel out of his stomach. The look of fear in one of our patient's eyes when he was bleeding out on our table. And he just shoots up, looks me straight in the eye, and screams, "Are you gonna quit fucking around? Or are you gonna save my life?" We mostly treated American soldiers, but we also treated Afghan army soldiers, civilian contractors, locals, even a couple Taliban. We'd patch them up, we'd stabilize them, and then we'd send them to the hospital at Bagram Air Base. We also treated a couple kids. About a month after we got in country, we were told that we were going to be doing follow-up care for a young Afghan boy. We had taken over the base from the Polish army, and about a year before we had gotten there, one of these drunken Polish assholes had shot a flare gun in a crowd of kids, and it hit this kid in the stomach, injuring him badly. He had to be airlifted to the hospital in Bagram, and he stayed there for a year to undergo surgery. Then when they released him to his village, he was in our area of operations. So we were going to be doing follow-up care for him. The day of this kid's appointment comes, and he comes in, carried on his grandfather's back. He couldn't walk anymore because of his injuries. But, you know, this kid comes in and just lets out a cheery hello. He spoke perfect English. He picked it up in Bagram. And this kid, like, he had been for the ringer, but you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at him. He was always cheerful, he was talkative, always smiling, just a really great kid. And in a weird way, it was nice having him around. I think especially for the soldiers that had family back home. So the doc comes in, takes his kid to one of the exam rooms to give him a checkup. And before they pulled the curtain, I got a look at this kid's torso. It was just a mess of burn scars, skin grafts. The flare round that had hit him had lodged into his abdomen and cooked him from the inside out. Most of his intestines had to be removed. It's frankly a miracle that he survived. Anyway, after his appointment, my squad leader comes up, this crusty old bastard from South Carolina. And he goes up to this kid with a big smile on his face and he says, "Hey kid, you want some chocolate?" The kid politely declined. "Oh, I don't know any kid that doesn't like chocolate." Again, he declined. It didn't occur to me until later that he probably couldn't eat it because of his injuries. Anyway, once a week, this kid and his grandfather come in and for their checkup. But then one week the kid didn't show. We were obviously concerned, so we asked our leadership what had happened. They told us that the kid's grandfather had been caught spying for the Taliban. And so we weren't allowed to treat them anymore. We never saw them again. I think about this kid and his grandfather a lot. It's been almost 10 years, but I can still see their faces. I don't blame the old man for what he did. A lot of the times the Taliban, they would threaten locals to get them to work for them. So it's highly likely that that's what happened. And even if it wasn't, even if he did want to get revenge on us, it doesn't matter that the guy that did this was Polish or American. One guy with a flare gun had robbed this man's grandson of the ability to walk, to play with the other kids, even the simple joy of eating a candy bar. And it probably doomed him to an early and painful death. The rage and the anguish that this man felt, that's something that I understand. I've never felt anger towards him. What I do feel is shame. I'm ashamed that when we were told that we weren't allowed to treat this kid anymore, that I didn't say something, that I didn't speak up to my leadership and try to figure out some way, any way that we could help him. Because this shouldn't have happened. I mean, he's a kid. This shouldn't happen to a kid. It was just a senseless thing in war that happened. We should have done more to help this kid, but we couldn't. I hope he made it.
It looked like it was going to be a great war. I mean, all my friends were very keen to join up. They were. Not me. Royal Military College had been enough for me. Now, the reason I went to RMC is, well, I could ride a horse, and I was a great shot. I mean, I'm a really good shot. I've got these tremendous eyes, you see. And RMC had an entrance exam, and that was good because my previous scholastic record wasn't that hot. In fact, when I suggested to my principal that indeed I was going to RMC, he said, "Bishop, you don't have the brains." But I studied real hard, sat for the exams, and got in. Recruits! Recruits will march at all times. They will not loiter. They will not window shop. Recruits! Recruits will run at all times. When in the parade square, recruits! Recruits will be soundly trounced every Friday night, whether they deserve it or not. I mean, those guys were nuts. They were going to make leaders out of us. The theory being that before you could learn to lead, you had to learn to obey. So because of this, we're all assigned to this upperclassman as kind of, well, slave. And I was assigned to this real sadistic son of a bitch. This guy named Vivian Bishop. That's right. The same surname as me. And because of that, I had to tuck him into bed at night, kiss him on the forehead, and say, "Good night, Daddy." I mean, it's pretty hard to take some of this stuff seriously. One of my punishments, I'm supposed to clean out this old Martello tower by the edge of the lake. I mean, it's filthy. It hasn't been used for years. Now, I do a real great job. I clean it up real well. This upperclassman comes along to inspect it. What's this in the corner, Bishop? That's a spider, sir. That's right, Bishop. That's a spider. Now you had orders to clean this place up. You haven't done that. You get down on your hands and knees and eat that spider. I had to eat that spider in front of all my classmates. You ever have to eat a spider in public? I doubt it. Nuts. Now, whenever I'm not happy, whenever I'm not having a real good time, I do one of three things. I get sick, I get injured, or I get in an awful lot of trouble. My third year at RMC, I got into an awful lot of trouble. This friend of mine, Townsend, one night we got a bottle of gin, eh? And we stole a canoe. Well, we'd arranged to meet these girls on Cedar Island, out in Dead Man's Bay. Well, of course, the canoe tips over. Now it's early spring, really cold. We get back to shore somehow. We're shivering, and Townsend says to me, Bish, I'm going to the infirmary. I think I got pneumonia. And I'm sitting there saying, well, whatever you do, silly bugger, change into some dry clothes. Because we couldn't let anybody know what we've been doing. I mean, we were absent without leave, in possession of alcohol, and we'd stolen a canoe. What I didn't know was the officer on duty had witnessed the whole thing. Townsend goes to the infirmary and is confronted with these charges. He admits everything. I didn't know that. I'm really awakened out of my sleep and hauled up before old Adjutant Peralt. Sir, I've been in bed all night. I really don't know what you're talking about, sir. Come on now, Bishop. We have the testimony of the officer on duty. We also have the full confession of your accomplice implicating you fully in this. Now, what is your story, Bishop? Well, I figured I was in too deep now to change my story. Sir, I still maintain. Bishop, I'm going to say the worst thing I can say to a gentleman cadet. You're a liar, Bishop. I got 28 days restricted leave for that. It's like house arrest. Then they caught me cheating on my final exams. Well, I handed in the crib notes with the exam paper. And that's when they called me the worst student RMC ever had. They weren't going to tell me what my punishment was until next fall, so I could stall about it all summer. But I knew what it was going to be. Expulsion with full honors. But when the war broke out and I enlisted and they made me an officer, for me, it was the lesser of two evils. But everyone else was very keen on the whole thing. They were.
Boy, those were the days. Remember when Achilles was giving everybody the business? Wasn't that something? Achilles and Hector out there swinging away. Spectacular. But of course, it was just a matter of time before it all went to hell. Because first, Achilles killed Hector. And that was an ugly, sordid business. And then that putz Paris killed him, Achilles. I still can't believe it. And suddenly it all seemed just so pointless and paltry. A bunch of guys hacking at each other and yelling. Oh, and God, it was so hot. Dust and sand getting into everything, storms of it blinding you. The bugs crawling around your sweaty skin beneath all the armor. Awful. And for what? Can anyone even remember? The only thing that had a little shine to it anymore was Achilles' armor. It lay there, bouncing light around his empty tent and waiting. Guys would go in and look at it. They'd see their own faces in it and think, oh, if only. Not that there was that much suspense. Everybody knew it was Ajax's. He was the next in line. Sure, maybe he wasn't all that bright, not a sparkling conversationalist, but by God, he got the job done. There was a contest for the armor. Votes were cast, and maybe there was some funny business with the ballots. I'm not saying, but surprise, surprise, he didn't get the armor, Ajax. No, it went to my buddy, Odysseus. And it's not like everybody thought Ajax would be fine with that. It's just that no one expected him to go completely bananas. Well, they didn't. I did. I knew exactly what would happen. Because a guy like him, he's got a rudimentary but absolutely infallible sense of justice. And when you take away from him the thing he spent his entire life earning, you better duck. Kablooey! He's running around his tent in circles, working up a head of steam that's going to send him off to kill, well, everybody. It's a long list. But the top of the list is Agamemnon and Menelaus, joint chiefs of staff. And Odysseus, of course. But he doesn't just want to kill Odysseus. He wants to torture him all night and then kill him. Well, I can't have that. So when night falls, I drive him crazy. I've got him frothing at the mouth, and I point him towards the corral and watch him run headlong into a flock of sheep and goats and cows. He spins there, plunging his knife and slicing, blood of his slaughter roping through the air, falling like veils over him as he works through the night. Neck by neck, he opens every animal. But when dawn comes, he's not done yet. He drags some of his victims back into the tent with him, and he begins to torture them. Each one is another Odysseus. He gets to make Odysseus suffer again and again. Now, now, now. Ajax smiles with every bellow beneath his knife. But then he truly wakes up and realizes he hasn't slaughtered his enemies, rather innocent animals. And out of guilt and shame, he turns the knife and kills himself.
What I wanted to do, but couldn't see myself working in an office, and certainly not in a skirt. I took the exam for New York City firemen when it first opened up to women in 1977. It was on the news, and there were protests outside City Hall. There were bumper stickers, "Don't send a girl to do a man's job." Nick Mancuso, the union president, warned that New Yorkers would die as a result of women being hired. There was a lawsuit, and it was the job's fault. They changed a standard pass-fail physical to the circus they put us through, and it blew up. I think many of us would have passed that other physical, and that was their greatest fear. 5 years later, a new physical was court-ordered by Judge Sifton. A funny story about the judge. His son was arrested for arson a few years later. The revised test wasn't a walk in the park either. Only 41 out of 110 passed. I rode my bicycle a total of 12 miles every day commuting to the academy from 72nd Street and Broadway. I even rode home with carbon monoxide poisoning. Back then, there were no OSHA standards. They had live burns in 55-gallon drums. They were filled with painted, tarred, or varnished wood, tires, or anything to create acrid smoke. Thick smoke. the type that latched onto the hairs inside your throat, made it tough to swallow. They had us run around the building a few times in our gear before they ordered us into the smokehouse. Several members in our class were taken by ambulance to the ER for smoke inhalation. I was lucky to have lunch right after and spent the hour in the locker room on the shower floor. One of the instructors found out that Vinnie Boland, president of the Uniformed Officers Association, was my first cousin, and they let me know about it. I was hooked onto a scaling ladder with a safety belt at a fourth floor window, and the lieutenant, I called him Sasquatch because he had big feet. He ordered me to lean back and spread my arms out like wings. When I was a kid, my mother had me sit on the window ledge of our fifth floor apartment with a rag to clean them. There were no guards on the windows or hooks to hold me in. There was a spiked fence below me and not a net. Sasquatch grabbed the ladder by the gooseneck and made a couple of remarks about Vinny. He rattled the ladder, but not my nerves. I had dinner with Vinny before we got sworn in, and basically he told me it'd be tougher than Jackie Robinson breaking into baseball. He suggested that I keep busy when I get to the firehouse. Always step up and be the first in the sink. He told me to change my lifestyle. In between bites of steak, he said, I knew one fag in the department and it didn't end up well. He told me not to tell anyone we were related. I understood why once we got in the academy. They looked for any weakness and used it to break you. A week into training, they singled me and a few other women out and labeled us overweight. They created a fat farm. The fucked up thing about it was I excelled in PT. I was one of the top 5 women in our class. Every day we faced new challenges and humiliation. The pressure was on, and our male classmates resented us for it. Our union fueled the fire too. No pun intended. The union boss, Nick Mancuso, visited The Rock often to talk about their lawsuit to get us fired. My union dues went toward getting me fired. After 6 weeks of training, I was assigned to a single engine company, Engine 44 on the Upper East Side. It was like Vinny said, they didn't want me there. I've got a few stories, but I'll save them for another time. I worked with some incredible people, a couple of assholes too, but the superstars made it all golden. Bottom line, I didn't quit, no matter what they threw at me. It was my job.
Anybody else's experiences. And yeah, I've heard the old saying, war is hell. For me, not so much. One night, my grandfather found me on a hill not far from our Curie, our house, tending our flock of sheep. I was sitting by a small fire. The desert gets cold at night. He walked up to me, not saying a word. He held out his hand, holding an unopened, official-looking letter. I gripped the letter to take it from him, but he held on to it for a moment, not letting go. Our eyes met, and I knew what it was, and so did he. No need to open it. I stuffed it in my shirt pocket. He put his hand on my shoulder, and he sat next to me on the ground, and we said nothing as the fire slowly burned out. 3 weeks later, I left the rest on the bus with nothing but my new warrior name and a pouch of red dirt and sage around my neck, headed to Los Alamitos Joint Military Base. During training, I qualified an excellent marksman, could run the mile in under 6 minutes with a fully loaded pack, and kicked ass in unarmed combat. The DI, Sergeant Dixon, loved to call me Engine Joe and was always breaking my balls. No big deal. They sent me to Special Forces training, and I earned my Green Beret and was shipped out to Nam in fall of '69. My battalion deployed to the valley just south of the Cambodian border outside of An Loc. It never bothered me being alone. So I regularly volunteered for perimeter night watch. Instead of minding sheep, I was watching for any sign of Viet Cong, who were just across the border. They were nice and knew they were close. I could hear rustling, small talking sounds, but no gunfire, nothing hostile. Everyone thinks that Nam was just one giant, green, steaming hot jungle. But they were nice who froze their ass off, just like those cold nights on a desert hilltop back home. One night, watch, I said, screw it, and build a small fire. Crazy, right? While squatting by the fire, I hear rustling and low chatter again. I slowly stood up, my heart pounding. I grabbed my N16 rifle by the top handle, slowly walked about 8 feet away to a tree, leaned my rifle against it, and crossed back to the fire and sat, never taking my eyes off where I heard the sounds. Not 5 minutes later, as I slowly scan around, I make eye contact with a squatting VC soldier not 20 feet away in the tall grass. I don't move. He doesn't move. Then he nods his head, and I do the same. He slowly stands up if I was AK rifle, no weapon. We stare at each other maybe another minute. Then he turns, walks away back to the dark. I grab a can of sea rations, eat, tend the fire, and leave a few hours later as the sun is coming up. Next night, same deal. Build my fire, rifle the tree, and watch the perimeter. Like clockwork, as same VC soldier shows up. This time, I stand up and slowly wave. He stands and points his hands at my fire. What now? So, I decide. I wave for him to come over. He slowly does, squats, rubs his hands to warm up. I silently hand motion eating and point to a couple sea rations. He nods. I give him the cans. He stands up, smiles, bows, and leaves. This routine went on for the next 4 nights. I build a fire, leave my weapon by the tree, and a different VC soldier shows up. We exchange sea rations, cigarettes, rice balls, fresh fish, you name it. All of this without one word spoken. On the 4th and last night I watched, same deal. Only this time the VC soldier squats by my fire and pulls from his pocket a small carved Buddha and hands it to me. My tribe has a custom that anything given must be met with another thing given back. I took off the small pouch of sage and red dirt from around my neck and gave it to him. He stood, bowed, and started to leave. Then he turned, pointing to himself and said, Tran Van Did. I stood up, touched my chest, and said, Chamin Ka Weeple. He nodded and left. I had told that VC soldier the sacred ritual warrior name my grandfather had given me before I went to war. Chamin Ka Weeple. He fears no one. And I didn't. And they didn't fear me. I sat back down by the fire and let it slowly burn out.
The next round is on me. Because we can for those who can't. So, I'm to be the subject of your paper. That's a switch. What are you, 20, 21? About how old I was when I started this man's club, man's army. Man's. Shit. They push that home all the time. Look, I don't want you to think that or get the wrong impression that this interview is going to be some kind of feminist pity party. Screw that. You ever hear the expression follow the money? Well, that's why I enlisted. See, the only way I was ever going to be able to afford college was the GI Bill. But there's just one little thing. In order to get it, you have to have been a GI. And hold the phone, you have to be alive to get it. You know, I worked for the high school paper and the first year and a half as a journalist major, but I had no financial way to hold on to it. So, hello, recruitment office. Fast forward to Afghanistan, wearing the latest fashion from Uncle Sam, recorder in hand, my camera-toting grunt sidekick, reporting the war for the folks back home, letting them know where their tax dollars were being paid or paid back because of the whatever terrorist shit the locals got into. You know, nothing about my job was easy or routine. You know, everywhere I was assigned was the front, the zone, the lead magnet. Imagine from every direction was incoming death. But that wasn't the worst of it. The worst was the eye-rolling looks, the over-the-top sexual comments, the complete dismissal from the other soldiers. I wasn't some civilian news network bimbo on assignment. I was a uniformed, successful, physically trained, qualified in firearms, unarmed combat, sworn oath to defend soldier. No, not to them. I was a tuna caught in a sea of tiger sharks, and blood was in the water. I never killed anyone. That's not to say that I never felt like it. I'd be lying to say otherwise. After 3 years, I was sent back home to fill, you know, the rest of my deployment as the National Guard and be able to continue on with my education again and start my visits at the VA hospital. You know, I went to the registration nurse for help with my recurring symptoms of hypervigilance, panic attacks, emotional numbness, classic PTSD. See you next Tuesday. That's right. CUNT. Looked at me and laughed. Shut up. And said that wasn't possible because only men that had seen the front lines or in combat could ever have PTSD. I stared at her, took a deep breath, and leaned into her face and says, "Does a mortar round blowing up the shower trailer that I just got out of count? Or the IED explosion blowing up my cameraman that close to me? Or half of the mess hall disappearing in smoke and flames as I luckily decided against another second helping? I think those qualify as combat. You cracker mudflap." Sorry, I don't have a cock. I'll be right back. I gotta go to the head. Sorry, the toilet.
Hey, thanks, Doc. I appreciate you seeing me outside of the group and all. Well, I just, how do I put it? That kind of story isn't for everybody. I never mentioned that I didn't volunteer like some of the other guys. You know, killing wasn't on my life's menu. 2 weeks after I graduated with a bachelor's in graphic design, the local draft board decided to invite me to the circus in Vietnam. No experience necessary. You know, my aptitude test showed my drawing skills, and it landed me in intelligence as a topographer, a map maker. After basic, I got stationed in a 3-room shack next to a supply depot, the 5th Division I Corps Intelligence Compound in Queen Yan. And when I wasn't in the bush gathering bullshit rice paddy coordinates for the next bombing run, I'd be at my drafting table with the air conditioner when it worked on full blast. So it's 106 degrees, 98% humidity, and the fucking air conditioner crapped out. So I opened a window, propped open the shades when a 2.5 truck pulls up about 20 yards from where I'm standing. A South Vietnamese grunt jumps out, flips down the tailgate, while another one starts pushing out blindfolded and tied up Viet Cong prisoners. And as the 4th and last one is lined up, from the far side of the truck appeared this starched, camouflage, pants pegged into jet black boots, bald, 6'3" image of fuck you officer I'd ever seen. It was like Mr. Clean goes to war. Around his waist was a military issued .45, and next to that was the biggest bone handled, remember the Alamo non-military Bowie knife I'd ever seen, and it had a beaded sheath. So the officer, he pointed and motioned for a prisoner to be pulled out of line. Said something in Vietnamese to the grunt I couldn't hear, who in turn said it to the Cong prisoner. No reply. He even repeated it, and again, no reply. So then the officer shouts something in perfect Vietnamese, and the other Vietnamese grunts were undoing the blindfolds of the other prisoners. And he walked up to them, looked them all in the eyes, and walked back to the still blindfolded prisoner that wouldn't talk. And faster than a cheetah on speed, he pulled out that Bowie knife and he completely eviscerated the Cong prisoner. And as he fell in the dirt and writhed in pain, trying to keep his guts in. And the other grunts were taking down everything that the prisoners were saying at this point. But the officer, he knelt down and wiped the blood off of his knife on the dying prisoner's shirt. And as he did, he slowly looked up at me and smiled and and asked if I enjoyed the show. I turned away from the window and sat down. I mean, I thought I'd seen crazy before. But this put my brain on full pinball tilt. And then bam, he comes right into the room, comes right up to me with his hand out, extended, and he says in this thick Texas accent, "Captain R.T. Crawford, Intelligence." And as I returned a salute, I replied, "Corporal Richard Hurst, Maps." He then pulled out a flask from his fatigue pocket, took a long pull and offered it to me, saying, "Best sour mash money can smuggle." I took the flask, not wanting to look like a total candy ass, and I took an equally long pull. And in my best macho voice, "Thank you, sir. That's some knife, sir." And then he paused and just stared at me as if I pissed in his cornflakes. And I thought, this is it. This is how my tour is going to end. Instead, he just laughs and says, "You ain't shitting shiny new dimes." He then proceeded to tell me that Queen Yan was going to be his base of operations for the next 2 years. That's it. That's how I met Captain Crazy Crawford. Up till now, Doc, you're the only person I've ever told that story. I don't know. Maybe God forgives crazies. After all, he made them. Right?
Hello again. I hope you enjoyed the offering other countries heard from. And now that we've reached the end, for some, it's only the beginning. And for that's the veteran who's just come back and needs a little help. So that's why we're here, Deploy the Arts. And the information on that card is, again, my name, my phone number, and my email. So please do not hesitate to have any veteran who needs some help to contact me and the organization, and we will be here. So once again, many thanks for watching and stay strong. Thank you.